Hello and welcome to NASCompares, and if you're watching this video, you're doing it because either you've bought yourself a brand new Terramaster NAS and you're looking for help set it up, or you're on the fence, on the verge of buying a Terramaster NAS and you just want to know how straightforward it's going to be. Now, we have discussed Terramaster alongside a bunch of other brands numerous times over the last few years. Indeed, just over 2 years ago, we did a full multi-part series focusing specifically on Terramaster and the TOS NAS platform, how to set it up, how to make the most of it, how to set up your storage, shares, backups, multimedia, and more. However, that was 2 years ago, and in that time many things have changed. TOS has seen numerous updates in its graphical user interface, default settings and capabilities, and the hardware has changed. What you get for your money and what these things are capable of. So we've decided to revisit the subject of setting up these devices for the first time and help you get your Terramaster right first time. This is part 1 in this series, where I'm going to be showing you the hardware setup, installing the software, and getting your RAID configuration or storage pool set up from scratch. Later updates in this video series will cover shared folders, distribution of your data, backup, security, multimedia, indexing, and more. But let's keep our feet on the ground a little bit and get things moving. So, what do you need for your installation? Well, the first thing you're going to need is a Terramaster NAS. Now, today we're going to be focusing specifically on this, the Terramaster F4-424 Pro, part of their newer 2024 generation of devices. But pretty much all of the steps, with the exception of a couple of small bits, are applicable to every single Terramaster NAS. Even the older generation ones like this one, which we will be referring to later on in the video to show some of those distinctive differences. The next thing you're going to need, other than the Terramaster NAS of course, is your storage media. And in this video, we're not only going to be installing traditional hard drives, but we're also going to be installing M.2 NVMe SSDs. Now, before we get into the generational details on that, it's also worth highlighting you can go ahead and install 2.5-inch SSDs if you choose to, instead of hard drives. These will provide a storage boost, but bear in mind that capacity-wise, you're looking at between 4 TB and 8 TB, depending on the quality of the NAND. And ultimately, although there is a performance benefit to 2.5-inch SATA SSDs inside this system, as well as utilising them for caching if you choose, I personally would recommend the utilisation of hard drives and M.2 NVMe's, as the majority of modern generation Terramaster NASs arrive with both hard drive bays and M.2 NVMe SSD slots inside, and that allows you to use these either as traditional storage, just like you would with a hard drive, allowing for much higher performance, or you can use them for caching. In the case of write caching, it means that data being sent to this system for uploading is written to the SSD, and then the SSD in the background moves it to the hard drives, improving responsiveness. And when it comes to read caching, it means that the data that is more frequently accessed on the system, smaller, tinier, small I/O data, is copied, not moved, onto the SSDs, thereby ensuring that further frequent access to that data is pulled from the SSD and not the hard drives, once again improving performance and lowering latency, i.e. responsiveness. Another thing worth touching on is that in this system, where even though it's a 4-bay system, I'm going to be using 3.5-inch hard drives and only 2 of them. Now, the reason for that is as follows. Number 1, you don't need to fully expand these systems on day 1. Just because they've got 4 bays or 8 bays or 9 bays or 12 bays doesn't mean you have to fully populate it. You can run these devices with as little as 1 hard drive if you choose. And later on, it allows you to add drives gradually as you move forward throughout the use of your system in the years to come. So you can go ahead and leverage the amount that you're going to spend on your NAS and go for a smaller number of larger hard drives and add more drives later on. The other reason that I'm only going for 2 drives instead of more is later on in this video series, I'm going to be talking about T-RAID. T-RAID from Terramaster allows you to mix and match drives. Why would you do that? Well, it means, unlike a traditional RAID that requires every single drive to be exactly the same capacity, T-RAID allows you to mix and match. So if, say on day 1, you took this 4-bay and put 2 8 TB drives, and years later, as the cost of hard drives goes down, when you want to add more storage, you want to put a couple of 20 TB drives in there, T-RAID allows you to use that larger storage capacity on those drives in a way that normal RAID configurations don't. And that's why we're only putting 2 drives in today, because later on in this video series, I'm going to show you how to expand. The only other things left that we need are the external power brick that will arrive with your Asustor accessory kit, the Ethernet cable, again, your Asustor kit, and for some of you, you're going to require a screwdriver. Again, in most cases, the screwdriver arrives with your Terramaster accessory kit there. But for now, let's move away from the physical stuff here on the table and begin the physical installation. Now, an important early detail when it comes to installing the media inside your Terramaster NAS is that if you are going to put a combination of hard drives and SSDs, always install the SSDs first, because during the installation you are going to be moving this device around, and hard drives are more susceptible to shock and motion damage in a way that SSDs aren't. Now, modern generation Asustor NASs have arrived with a newer and far more convenient means to install these SSDs. So in the case of the new F4-424 Pro series case here, there are 2 screws that you need to remove here on this side here, 1 screw above there. Just go to the side that has the ports, remove those 2 screws, and this will allow you to remove the main side panel of this system. That side panel, once removed, allows you to see the main controller board, and as you can clearly see, there are our M.2 NVMe slots. Each one has a flathead screw there on the top that needs to be removed there. You'll need to remove those screws in order to install your SSDs. And bear in mind, you don't necessarily need to install hard drives to run this system. You can go ahead and run the Terramaster system on just M.2 NVMe's. Although I personally wouldn't recommend it because it would seem like a waste of all that extra storage. And bear in mind again that the M.2 NVMe's can be used for both storage and SSD caching. You can run one as one and one as the other if you choose to. Now, in older generation Terramaster NAS devices, they don't have this easy to remove side panel and require the whole system to be dismantled from the outer casing in order to access that panel. So do bear that in mind, that the older generation of Terramaster NAS devices, and we'll bring that up over here, require you to remove all of the screws around the rear of this chassis that you can see around there, to remove that back panel there, and that allows this area here to be exposed out to access that control panel. It is nowhere near as convenient as this, and double check with the specification pages to see that your system actually does have those slots before you start taking it apart. Once you've installed those drives, replace that panel, slot it back in, and re-screw that rear panel straight in there. Again, NVMe's are not susceptible to motion and general shock in the way that hard drives are. Next up is hard drive installation, and again, we're only installing 2 drives in this system. Remove the hard drive tray, remove the side clips, which I'm pleased to say that any Asustor released since 2019 or 2020 arrives with. Put your hard drive with the label face up and the SATA connector there on the rear, and then replace those side clips that you just removed. This will hold the drive in place, and that means that you can install it inside very, very conveniently. As you can see there, our drive is now in that caddy, and we can slot it in like so. And again, as mentioned, older generation Terramaster devices, although this is quite an old chassis, do provide quite sturdy trays, but also the means to click and load those trays inside. So that's something that's included for a while. However, bear in mind that both in the case of the new and old generation devices, for 2.5-inch media, you will need to screw those in with the screws that your system arrives with there. Now that you've installed your storage media into your Terramaster NAS, the next thing we need to do is get this connected to the local area network or directly to an internet connected router. Now, depending on your setup, things are going to differ quite a lot, and I think it's important that we talk about some of those distinctions. Now, if you are a home user, chances are the only device you've got in your home for managing physical network connections is the router provided by your internet service provider. Now, you can go ahead, use the Ethernet cable that Terramaster supply with your accessory kit take the cable, connect it to the rear of your NAS via one of the Ethernet cables connected, and we will be doing an advanced network setup video as well. You can go ahead and connect it to the rear of your router, and there you go. That means that your Terramaster NAS can now not only download all of its network updates for the firmware directly via the internet, but on top of that, you can allow remote access connection via Terramaster servers or using third-party remote access software such as Tailscale, and again with VPN services built in as well. Nevertheless, if you're running a larger network, or you are particularly scrutinous about your security, or you want to have access to this device but you don't want to give it easy access to the internet or allow this system to be able to change the port settings and rules on your router, it is recommended, rather than connecting it directly into your home router, your ISP router, or your premium router, but instead use a network switch. There was a time when network switches like this were incredibly enterprise and business only, but now you can pick up network switches for as little as $10 to $15. Connecting the NAS into a network switch and then this network switch into your router allows several extra options. Number one, it ensures that this device can communicate with all the other devices on the local area network with more ports if need be. Secondly, it introduces a network barrier and security barrier between it and your router, thereby, if you choose to, denying it any access to the wider internet. A lot of people don't realize this, but most NAS devices never need to be connected directly to the internet if they don't want to. The systems themselves arrive with a firmware bootloader that will install the software with no internet connection if needed. It is recommended to use the internet either with the device in your local area network or utilising the internet via a connected PC or Mac device to upload the latest firmware if you choose, but you don't need the internet to use a NAS. You only need the internet in conjunction with a NAS to, one, allow access to it remotely outside of your home or business environment, or two, if you want firmware updates to be automatic for both the whole system and individual apps. It really is up to you, but personally I would always recommend introducing a switch between it and your router for security and control reasons. Now you've decided whether you're going to connect this via a switch or directly into the router in your home or business, the next thing we need to do is power the device on. Take the PSU that the system arrived with in the retail kit. If you're using a larger Terramaster NAS, there may be no PSU and you directly connect into an internal PSU, but nonetheless, connect your PSU and then from there, take the main power connector and put that into your PSU. You should know if the PSU is functioning. You may hear a slight crackle, that's fine. And you should see a green light like you can see here on screen. That ensures that the system has a working PSU and that should deliver power to the system. Now, if we rotate this Terramaster NAS round gingerly, you can see the front of the system there. The power button will differ depending on your own system. For me, it's the rear button here. And what happens is the system will primarily check itself, doing a very quick system check to make sure all of the components are working. Then you'll hear that beep, which leads to the hard drives inside starting to spin up, as you can hear now. Again, depending on the complexity of your hard drives, the amount of noise they make will differ. Now, for the next step, we need to make our way over to Windows or Mac machine in order to conduct the rest of the installation. Let's head over to the desktop PC now and carry on setting up our Terramaster NAS. Now, setting up your Terramaster NAS for the first time will differ ever so slightly depending on whether you're given the system internet access, as we just discussed. What you need to do first is head over on your web browser to the Terramaster website and via the support section go to the download section and from there enter the details to find the downloads relevant to your own Terramaster NAS. The thing you're going to need to download first is the TNAS PC application. The reason being, this is the tool you're going to utilize to find the device on your local area network. I've already installed it here, and as you can see, I've done a scan of my local area network and it's found the NAS waiting to be initialized there. Again, this isn't the only tool you can use, and I do recommend as a third-party alternative the tool Advanced IP Scanner. It's completely free. I'm not affiliated with them. We get nothing. It's not sponsorship. It's just generally an app I like to use, and this allows you to scan your local area network and find every network device and then get its IP along with other further information. So if you're going to be connecting to an IP camera, if you want to know the identity of different devices on the network for troubleshooting, Advanced IP Scanner seems to be a great tool for that. Nevertheless, utilizing the Terramaster own tool does provide other advantages. For example, you can use it to map network drives, to go directly into file management and log in and even change the network identity. So within Terramaster, it's a great tool to use. The other thing you might want to download is if you want to make sure your Terramaster has no internet access, but you still need to put the firmware on, you can go ahead and download the latest firmware package for the software on your Terramaster NAS, and therefore upload it from this PC, allowing your Terramaster to have the latest firmware but not have any internet access. So what we're going to do now is head into the Terramaster application. We're now going to log into the device. It will open up in a new tab, and it's now going to read from the bootloader inside the Terramaster NAS system. It's delivered via a small USB key inside the system, and this will begin the installation of the Terramaster TOS software onto the system storage and get you started with your NAS. Now, the installation will take quite a few minutes depending on how you want to deliver the firmware. Go ahead and click Start. It will then scan the local area network and let you know that it's going to check for the hard drives that are installed inside the system. Click Next, and then from there you choose whether you want to do a standard default or a custom installation. I'm going to go for a custom installation because I don't want the system to just block use all of the storage. I want a little bit of curation on the storage. As you can see, not only has it found each of those individual WD-RED 8TB drives that I talked about earlier, but it's also found the two M.2 NVMEs inside. And what it's going to do now is check that those storage drives are healthy, and along with the SSDs as well, before writing any system operating system on them. It needs to know that these storage drives are going to be able to withstand and be utilized in this 24/7 NAS environment. Depending on the complexity of the drives you choose, the amount of time this takes will differ. But also make sure if you don't want to install the operating system on the SSDs that you uncheck both those drives. Only select the drives that you want to use for the installation. I'm going to fast forward to when the drives are complete, but as you can see, it's just found them, so no fast forward needed. Only select the drives that you want to use in the RAID main storage configuration, or if you want the OS to live on the SSDs, go ahead and select those instead. As you can see, it will wipe these drives when it installs the latest software. Go ahead and click Confirm. Now we need to either download the latest version of the software if the NAS has internet access, or you can manually upload that version of the operating system you downloaded earlier directly onto the system. Choose which one you want to go for and then select Next. Now my local PC is going to upload that package of TOS to install the latest software. Bear in mind, even if we didn't download the latest software or allow the system to have internet access, TOS still lives on the USB key inside, and it will be able to run the TOS operating system. However, it will be an outdated version that is perhaps insecure or lacking certain features that have been released more recently. Let's fast forward to the completion of the installation of TOS. Now that TOS has created our RAID area and created our TOS installation, we can go ahead and start creating user accounts on this system. As you can see, by default, the root or complete super user admin account on TOS is disabled. You can enable it, but it's not recommended. That is the tool you're going to need if you want to do particularly high level stuff. Ignore the beep, that's another NAS. So from here, click Confirm moving forward, and then either rename your device if you want to change the name. Also, give yourself a username there. Again, I'm choosing admin, but you don't need to use the username you need to use. And also on top of that, if you're going to have multiple users interacting with this system, you can create individual user accounts with their own login credentials and tailor which apps, services, files and folders they actually have access to. You can be very controlling over it, as well as create specific app-based usernames for things like Plex Media Server or backups that allow those processes to do their job while not giving them too much access to the NAS, which can be a security conflict. Now, moving forward from that, give yourself that password there. Again, depending on which password you use, it will warn you how secure it's going to be. Finally, if you wish, you can create an email connection between this device and your own email address, be it via a third party or a first party. And if the QNAP NAS has internet level access and you add, say, a Google Mail account on here, what will happen is whenever the Terramaster NAS is busy or has alerts and warnings, it will automatically email an alert and warning to you. If that doesn't sound like something you want to use, just go ahead and click Next. Now, we've already prepared the drives for that RAID creation. Now we have to go into the area where we start defining what the RAID pools that we're going to use and the volumes that we build on top of them. More on that in a moment. If you plan on just utilizing these storage drives, go ahead and make sure only those are selected. If, on the other hand, you want the OS to run on much faster SSDs, select them there. But I strongly recommend that you do not mix hard drives and SSDs in a single storage pool, as that will result in very poor performance and storage inefficiency by some large degree. But as you can see here, we've selected the two 8 TB drives, and the system is saying that we will have 8 TB of storage and 8 TB of redundancy. That is our safety net. Now bear in mind that's because we're using that T-RAID, that flexible RAID configuration where we can mix and match drives that we talked about earlier on. But if we choose, we can go for a JBOD. A JBOD utilizes all of the drives and has no failure protection whatsoever. The same goes for a RAID 0, but actually combining them. But at least in a JBOD configuration, data is written with one drive and then onto the other drive when the first one is full. Whereas in a RAID 0 configuration even, the data is written across both of the drives, giving you heightened performance, but no safety net in terms of your redundancy. And a RAID 1 has the same data being read and written to onto both disks simultaneously, resulting in half of the available capacity, but allowing you to have a safety net of one drive. Just bear in mind that as similar as RAID 1 and T-RAID sounds, T-RAID is the one that allows you to use mix and match different size drives later, whereas a RAID 1 will classify all the drives as the same smallest capacity available. Next, we need to create a volume. Now, this is really important because a lot of users don't understand the difference between a storage pool and a volume. A storage pool is our base. It's all of our drives with our safety net in place, all of our performance. It is the ground with which the foundation from which we're going to build from. Volumes are containers of storage. Now, if you wish, you can create one giant container of storage for all of your data, your multimedia, your backups, your surveillance, all of it going into one big pot if you choose. But a lot of users like to create multiple smaller volumes, one for the backups, one for the multimedia, one for whatever. And if you want to do that, instead of going for the full 8,000 gigabytes of capacity you're seeing here, you can create a different one and call this one backups, and this one we can say that it's going to use 2 terabytes of our storage, or 2,000 gigabytes, and later on we can create more storage volumes if we choose, each with their own name and their own purpose, and we can connect individual apps if we like. If that doesn't sound like something you want to use and you just want one big area of storage, just go ahead and go for 8,000. But for now, click Next. Next up, whether you want to use BTRFS or ext4 as your file system of choice. Now, BTRFS, as it states, or ButterFS, is the newer storage file system. It allows for greater scalability. It also provides a lower resource hit when using snapshots. It also provides advantages such as integrity checks on data as it passes through the system and faster shared folder copy and duplication. However, bear in mind, the ext4 is the newer is the more mature and more established file system of the two, and does provide a small increase in performance. But just bear in mind that it does have legacy downsides with regards to larger storage areas and more. Personally, in this system, I select BTRFS. And there you go, we can now create our storage volume on that storage pool. And now the system's going to go ahead and create that storage area on our storage volumes and make our way into TOS when it is done. And from there, as you can see, we can now start making our way into TOS here on the web browser. We can either use remote access or we can use local access there. Again, depending on if you are choosing to use remote access and internet protocol, these options will differ or not be available at all with regards to remote access. Go ahead and click that button and it will open up in a new tab your new Terramaster NAS GUI. The first time you enter into it, it will be a little slower as it starts creating the storage area and all of the apps and services that live therein. But just give it a little time, a few minutes, and in the meantime, go ahead back into your TNAS application and click refresh. And then from there, when the NAS is accessible and ready to go again, it will appear on that list. Let's fast forward. After around 8 to 10 minutes, the same IP you had earlier on should refresh in your web browser to show the TOS login window here, where you need to just go ahead and enter the login credentials that you created earlier. Again, later on we can add two-step authentication if we require it. But for now, as you can see, there's their terms and conditions. I recommend you read that. Otherwise, go ahead and click confirm. And from here, you can see that our storage area is now being configured. There is our T-RAID of the two 8 TB drives, as you can see there, being pulled together in that nice T-RAID configuration of both drives supporting read and write. And we can add further drives to that later on, something I'll show you later on. But at least for the next 12 to 24 hours, depending on the complexity of your RAID and the number of bays, you're going to have to wait for the RAID pool to finish synchronizing. You can start using your Terramaster NAS and you can start creating your storage areas, enjoying your storage pool and more. But just bear in mind that for that first time when it's synchronizing, performance will be lower on those drives. But once synchronization is completed, performance will spike back up. There's the volume we created earlier on, which is part of that synchronization there. And again, if we wish, we can create new storage areas that allow us on that storage pool to start creating those extra areas of storage, which can be utilized again for multimedia, surveillance, and more, depending on how we wish to proceed. The same goes for in our next video when we make our way into the storage manager or the file manager even, and start creating shared folders as well as creating new users, each of which of these new users will have their own levels and access, and I'll be walking you through the whole thing. And if you want to add two-factor authentication, go ahead into the user settings here at the top right, and from here you can start adding two-factor authentication on your supported OTP or 2FA application, as easy as that. But this has been the initial setup of your Terramaster NAS with TOS. In our next series, as mentioned, we'll be going through more advanced storage techniques for setting up your object file folder storage and user data. If you need more help in the meantime, however, I recommend the following. Number one, head over to NASCompares. On the right hand side of the screen, you've got our NAS builder to help you choose the right NAS for your first time needs, and the free advice section. The NAS builder allows you to build your first NAS from the ground up. Select the features and services that you want your NAS to do, select the number of users, select the amount of storage you need, select the number of bays, select the number of redundancy or drive failures, and indeed add your budget. Once you add all of that information along with the network speed that you want to utilize and any other extras you want to use, select Find a NAS and it will find the most appropriate NASs to your needs. If that's not enough, the free advice section not only lists community forums that we personally recommend and access to our Discord, but on top of that, official forums and subreddits that will help you along the way. Alternatively, if you need free advice, use our free advice section here, add your question, and then within 3 to 5 working days, myself or Eddie will get in touch. Alternatively, you can go ahead and use the Express service here, which for $8.45 allows you to get an answer within 24 hours. Alternatively, head to our Ko-Fi or Patreon pages, where not only can you access our membership circle, which allows you to have repeated next day support when needed, but also our monthly Zoom consultation and our monthly priority content and webinar and content polls. Or if you need a one-to-one consultation, then head back into Ko-Fi or Patreon, select services, and from there we have our Zoom consultation link here that we can do a one-to-one with you, myself or Eddie, to help you with your storage needs. And finally, there's our community forum if you're a touch old school. But there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this video and I look forward to seeing you on the next part.